speaking in a way that influences people by having your language easier to digest and agree with is a skill that I have been a professional at for the last 15 years. It has been necessary for me to have this skill in the types of service that I've been providing to reality. So I just sat here and I thought, what can I teach? This is something that I naturally do because I've developed this skill out of necessity, and I'm sure there's communication courses that has broken this down to a science. However, I just thought to myself, what could I offer off the top of my head based on all of my experience? How we can make ourselves better communicators by speaking in a manner that allows the person we're speaking to digest the concepts and ideas that we are relaying from our brain into voice patterns of vibration that's going to go hit their eardrum and then go into their brain and be received exactly as you intend it. And so I've got a list. So number 1, listen. Listen to what they're saying, and it is going to be impossible for you. Let me back up for a second. So this is going to be good for teachers. It's going to be good for negotiations. It's going to be good for just two people talking. Being able to have these communication skills is also going to be helpful for what used to be known as arguing, but really now is understanding a different perspective point of reality. That should be what arguing eventually evolves into. And this could be good for parenting. Anytime that we have to use our voice to enroll another into our vision. From a professional standpoint, this also is a very important skill in almost every profession. So listening. And so we don't want to just think about what we're going to say next before the person finishes talking, because there's other things on this list that you are going to see. We need to hear what they say completely and fully before we start speaking. Number 2, speak at their level or one level above them. This is especially important if you're a teacher because you know what level your students are at, okay? Or a parent. So we don't want to be speaking from our experience and from our level if we're speaking to somebody who's 20 years behind us, okay? Because they're not going to be able to interpret or make the connections of what you're trying to make. So we want to assess who we're speaking to, even if it's just people on the street. We may not be able to assess the level that people are at on the street. However, you can make assumptions if little triggers come up. So one little trigger could be someone who wants to argue. Argument is a stage of human development. If one is trying to argue with you, if that is their point, then that is a stage. You would not want to then speak at a very high, enlightened level of oneness to somebody who is very definitively trying to establish separation of ideas between their idea and your idea. It just won't work if you're talking about, well, everything is everything, to a person who very obviously isn't there yet. This is easier to do as a teacher. It's an easier point to establish as a teacher. However, even just regular communication, we want to constantly be making sure that we're communicating in a level that is similar to the person we're speaking to. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to get it. So when you begin to speak, let them know how you interpret what they're saying. So this could also be used in a counseling aspect. You got a friend who calls you and breaks down and lets you know everything that they're going through. Before you offer advice, let them know how you interpreted what they said. say something along the lines of, what I hear you saying is that you feel this way. Okay, so that gets you both in alignment with their standpoint. And of course, this could be used in negotiation. This could be used in relationships. This could be used in hierarchies where one level is communicating to another level, whether it's lower to upper or upper to lower. What I hear you saying is this. That way it's we're both established firmly in the standpoint of what the person was saying before we start talking. As soon as we start talking, now they are ready to add on to the foundation of their standpoint with what you are going to add to the conversation. Next point. I forget what number I'm on. Next point. Starting your communication with their communication. Agreeing with them. Letting them know that what they said is important to you. What they said you see truth in because, and you let them know why what they said makes sense to you. Now, this is some judo stuff, especially if someone's trying to argue. But if you do that, if you use their points, again, negotiation, if you're even trying to explain the oneness concept to somebody, this could also be helpful. If you use their points as support to your point, it would be very easy for them to be able to digest your point because you used what they said to support what you were going to say. And this can be used all the time. This could be used even friends. Friends are watching somebody go down a path that is self-destructive, and you ask questions, and then they say something, I want this out of my life, I don't want this in my life, I want this, but this is happening. You take some of the things that they say that they want, you present them back to them, you reflect them back to the person. Hey, you said you wanted this, right? And you said you wanted that. Do you know what would get you that? I've got this idea. It is this. As opposed to just being like, you should be doing this instead of all that. Like, reflect back to them what they said. When you're going to be making a point and you want that, do you agree with me? Look at them in the left eyeball. Left eyeball. Normally when we speak to people, we're looking into the right eyeball. Now there's some weird energetic stuff happening with this, but I've witnessed many cultures in ancient societies, the left eye is the eye that connects. From a yogic standpoint, the left side of the body is the intaking force. It is the intake of energy. And so if you're really trying to connect with someone, go through their left side. The right side is the excrete. Okay, so if you want to connect with them, you want to be going in through their left eye. And if you're on Zoom, make sure you're looking at the camera lens on those critical points. Face to face, find that left eyeball. And try and add a story in there or a metaphor. And it would be really good if you could use a metaphor or a story from their life. Hey, do you know when you were a contractor and you had to build stairs and and you use a story to support what you're saying. But everybody has stories. You can use stories from their lives, metaphors from their life. You can use stories from history. You can use the animal kingdom. You can use nature, like trees. A tree grows tall. The tree that grows the tallest is going to be very weak. I don't know. I just looked outside and I saw really tall palm trees, and it reminded me of something that I say a lot, which is trees that grow the quickest end up falling the soonest. Okay, because that really needs to be said a lot to people who are worried about other people getting ahead of them or them worried about themselves not going fast enough. The trees that grow the quickest, they got the open sunlight and they shot up. Their wood is actually weaker than the trees that had to fight for sunlight and grew very, very slow, and that causes a very, very dense matter in the trunk, the shaft of the tree. And so that's just an example of how you would use a story, and then you would then speak to the person about how this holdup is beneficial for them. So those are the points off the top of my head. I'll write them in the comments. Really easy things that you can speak in a way that people hear you. Otherwise, if you're kind of just speaking to prove that that you know what you're talking about, that you have something really cool to say, then people aren't really hearing you. They are hearing you, but your influence factor is going to be lower unless you are actively considering, how do I get what I'm saying to be interpreted and digested and taken to heart as much as possible within this person. And so for the last many years, I would say 15 years, my profession has relied on, I've got these wild and crazy, bizarre ideas, and I spoke in front of groups of people, and it was this constant of me enrolling people into my crazy vision, which then had to be their crazy vision because of my power of communication. Anyways, hope everyone's having a good time.